Hey guys! So I'm sure you know about the Steubenville rape trial, and if you don't, I'll put a link down there to Lacey Green's video that does a really good job of explaining it. Now, if there's anything resembling a bright side to the horrible dehumanizing of an unconscious teenage girl, it's that it opens the discussion for people to educate each other and hopefully prevent things like this from happening in the future. It led to Lacey making her really informative video, and hopefully this will be one as well. So while the Steubenville case was certainly not without uneducated people blaming the victim, a lot of people just seemed shocked that two seemingly really together, all-American, good kids could commit such a horrific crime. We as a culture cling desperately to the idea that rapists are these red-eyed monsters who jump out in alleyways and attack strangers. And while rape from strangers does happen, the vast majority of non-consensual sex happens between two people who know each other, often in the victim's home, often around people the victim trusts. And I say non-consensual sex there not because I believe that one rape is any more legitimate than any other, but because our culture does a really horrible job of educating what consent is, how to give it, and how to receive it. You often hear people shout, "No means no," attempting to educate young men that when they hear the word no from a partner, they have to stop. And that's great, and that's really important, but it also leaves out a lot. No means no also needs to include unconscious means no, not able to walk straight means no, throwing up all over yourself because you're so drunk means no, crying means no, I don't feel like it means no, anything that's not a yes means no. I really like how Lacey mentioned in her video that consent needs to be both physical and verbal. And if the person doesn't volunteer the word yes to you, you need to ask and never assume. Is this okay? Do you want to? Are you ready? Also, oftentimes people, and especially girls, based on the way we educate them differently, don't realize that saying no is an option. And before you think I'm being condescending to my own gender and assuming that we're not capable of standing up for ourselves or thinking for ourselves, our culture spends a hell of a lot of time telling us that our bodies don't belong to us. If your boss touches you on the butt while he talks to you, chances are someone's going to tell you that's just who he is. When someone catcalls you and makes you uncomfortable, boys will be boys. And if guys at a college party rate your body on a scale from 1 to 10, you should take it as a compliment. Girls are bombarded with those ideas their whole lives, and then when it comes to sex, they're expected to kick and scream no if they're uncomfortable. And if they don't, it's their fault that they let someone take advantage of them. So here's my message for everybody, and not just for girls. You're allowed to say no whenever you want to. I don't mean to talk down to anybody, but I just want to reiterate some things and make them explicitly clear in case no one has ever told you, because no one had ever explicitly told me. If you're married to him, you're allowed to say no. If you've been dating her for months, you're allowed to say no. If you did it last week but you don't want to now, you're allowed to say no. If you did it 20 minutes ago and you don't want to now, you're allowed to say no. If you've already started and you want to stop, you're allowed to say stop. If you're okay with some touches and not others, you're allowed to say so. If you've wanted to all evening but now you don't, you're allowed to say no. If you want to flirt and you want to tease but you don't want to have sex, you're allowed to say no. If you love them, you're allowed to say no. If he buys you an expensive dinner, you're allowed to say no. If she begs you, you're allowed to say no. If you feel like you owe them, you're allowed to say no. If you want to later but you don't want to now, you're allowed to say no. If you never want to have sex with anybody, you're allowed to say no. If they're your teacher or your church leader or your family member, you're allowed to say no. If you feel like you don't deserve to make your own choice, you deserve to. So there's my 2 cents. Thanks for watching, and I'll have more of the regular silly type videos later.